My name is Evelyn Harrow. I am 72 years old. Daniel and Clara took me to a restaurant that looked out over the Charleston Harbor, all white linen and quiet conversation. It was Clara's idea. Of course. She said it would be lovely to celebrate somewhere meaningful. Since I once worked on the seawall project nearby, that was decades ago, when my hands still smelled faintly of concrete dust and river wind. Now I held a coffee cup instead of blueprints. The smell was softer. But the habit of observation never left me. Clara sat across from me. Her smile stretched thin in a way that used to pass for grace. Daniel scrolled through his phone, his thumb tapping nervously against the glass. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said without looking up. Clara nudged him gently. "Put that away. It's her day." I nodded, pretending not to notice how quickly she took control of even that small moment. "It's fine," I said. "I'm glad you both came." The waiter brought lemon butter salmon, the kind I used to order after long shifts. The first bite was perfect, but I could feel something in the air, an unfinished sentence hanging between them. Clara kept talking about how expensive repairs had become, how older homes were too much to handle alone. "You've managed so much on your own," she said, her tone light. "But maybe it's time to let us help with the house. We could take care of the paperwork, make things easier." I stirred my coffee slowly. "The house doesn't trouble me." Her smile faltered, then returned, brighter than before. "Of course not. You're remarkable, Evelyn." The words sounded like flattery wearing heels too high. I focused on the water instead, the steady rhythm of boats rocking in the distance. When the waiter stepped away with our plates, Clara leaned closer to Daniel. Her voice barely brushed the air, but years of construction sites had taught me how to hear through noise. "While I distract her," she whispered, "go change the locks at her house." The sentence sliced cleanly through the sound of clinking glasses. Daniel hesitated, his eyes darting toward me. I looked down, tracing the rim of my cup with one finger, as though lost in thought. I didn't say a word. I smiled. Even years of managing unpredictable foundations had taught me something important. Silence can hold more weight than anger. I lifted the coffee to my lips and tasted calm. Somewhere deep inside, the old precision woke again. Measuring, planning, steadying, outside. The tide began to rise against the dock. Chapter 2. The House I Built. After the lunch, I drove back to Bayline Road. The porch light blinked once before holding steady. I sat in the car, letting the hum of cicadas fill the silence. The house stood quiet and strong, the same way it had since the day I first laid its frame in the mud with my own hands. When Martin died, Daniel was 3. He clung to my skirt at the funeral, asking, "Where did Daddy go?" I told him Daddy went to help build something bigger, though I had no idea what that meant. That night, when he fell asleep on my lap, I decided to build something too, something solid enough to hold us both. It began on the kitchen table, under the dim light that buzzed whenever the wind shifted. I sketched walls and windows on the backs of discarded blueprints. Daniel's crayon drawings crowding the corners. The lines weren't perfect, but they were ours. I took every extra shift I could weekends at the firm. Evenings stacking boards at the lumber yard. The foreman lent me an old hammer, its handle worn smooth by other hands. Each swing was a small rebellion against grief. Daniel played in the dirt nearby, hammering pebbles with a toy mallet. "You missed a spot. Mom?" He'd call out. I'd laugh, hand him a scrap of wood, and tell him to keep me on schedule. Those afternoons smelled of sawdust and peanut butter, the 2 scents that defined our survival. The day I hung the final door, Daniel ran inside barefoot. "This one's mine," he shouted, racing into the smallest room. I'd painted it sky blue so he could see the clouds in the window reflection. His laughter echoed down the empty hallway, a sound that still lingers in the beams. Over the years, we repaired every crack and leak together. He learned how to hold a level straight, how to replace shingles during summer storms. We built not just walls, but a rhythm, a kind of language made from effort and faith. Even after he moved out, I could still hear the echoes of that laughter on quiet nights. This house wasn't a structure. It was memory turned tangible, a blueprint of everything we survived. Now, standing in the doorway, I touched the carved frame. The wood was smooth beneath my fingers, steady as my breath. Whatever they were planning, I thought they'd forgotten something crucial. I built this place with my own 2 hands. And love like that does not surrender. It started with small visits. Clara began stopping by on Saturday mornings, always carrying something fresh bread, folded papers, or a smile too deliberate to be warm. Daniel came with her sometimes, but he spent most of those mornings in the yard, pretending to check the gutters or the fence. "I thought we could look at some of your mail together," Clara said one morning, setting her bag on the kitchen counter. "Just to make sure nothing important slips through. I manage fine," I said, rinsing my coffee mug. "Of course you do," she answered quickly. "You've always been independent, but bills and taxes get confusing these days, don't they?" So many forms. Her tone was sugar wrapped around steel. I took the envelope she offered, one marked property assessment. Daniel walked in then, wiping his hands on a towel. "Clara's just trying to help, Mom." "I know," I said. "That's what worries me." He laughed softly, but it didn't sound like him. The next week, she brought more papers. I had a friend from work look over some documents. She said, sliding them across the table, "It's just a small adjustment to the deed. Nothing changes for you. It just lists Daniel as co-owner in case of emergencies." I looked at her, then at Daniel. He kept his eyes on the floor. "I've lived through hurricanes," I said. "I think I know how to prepare for emergencies." She tried again. "It's about security, Evelyn. We don't want you to feel alone if something happens. Then stop planning for something to happen." The air tightened. Daniel shifted his weight, his voice low. "Maybe it's time to start thinking long-term." "I already have," I said, folding the papers neatly. "That's why I keep them here." I opened a drawer and placed them inside, locking it where they belong. Clara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "You're stubborn," she said softly. "Careful construction takes patience," I replied. When they left, the kitchen still smelled faintly of her perfume and new ink. The papers in the drawer felt heavier than wood. The rain came early that evening, heavy and cold, rolling off the gutters in silver sheets. Daniel's truck was parked by the curb. I hadn't expected them, but I saw their silhouettes through the porch glass. Clara pacing, Daniel standing still. I opened the kitchen window slightly, just enough to hear over the sound of the rain. "She won't live there much longer," Clara said. Her voice was low, sharp beneath the thunder. "You just have to make it sound like it's for her safety." Daniel didn't answer. I could picture the crease between his brows, the one he used to get as a boy when he was caught in a lie. "She built this house, Clara," he said finally. "She's not going to hand it over. Then make her believe it's temporary." Clara snapped. "You said she's been forgetting things." "Use that. We'll fix it after she moves in with us." I gripped the edge of the counter. My hands were wet from washing dishes, but I didn't notice until a drop fell onto the floor. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating their faces through the porch door, hers tight with impatience, his pale with doubt. "Just say you're worried about her falling, or the wiring, or whatever," Clara continued. "She trusts you." He looked down. "She used to." The words hit harder than the thunder. I stepped back from the window, every breath measured. The air smelled of wet soil and betrayal. When I finally opened the porch door, they startled like guilty children. "I didn't hear you knock," I said. "We were just checking the gutters." Clara replied quickly. "In a storm?" I asked, my voice steady. "That's brave." She smiled, but it didn't hold. Daniel muttered that they should go, and they left without looking back. The rain didn't let up. I stood on the porch long after their taillights disappeared. Water soaking through my sleeves. My heart didn't race. It steadied. The same calm that had once guided my hands through blueprints returned, precise and silent. I locked the door behind me and began to plan. The morning after the storm, I called an old number I hadn't dialed in years. It belonged to Henry Lang, a man I'd once worked beside on construction bids before he left engineering for law. His secretary put me through in less than a minute. "Evelyn Harrow," he said, surprise softening his voice. "You still outbuilding the rest of us?" "Not anymore," I replied. "Now I just keep what's mine standing." He must have heard something in my tone because his voice turned professional. "What happened?" "Let's just say my foundations are being tested," I said. "I need help reinforcing them." 2 days later, we met at his office downtown. The space smelled faintly of cedar and ink. He still wore the same glasses, still leaned back in his chair before asking the hard questions. "You're talking about your house?" he asked. "Yes," I said, "and everything tied to it." He nodded. "Then we'll do this properly. You'll sell the property to a private buyer through a trust, with full legal documentation. The proceeds will go into accounts under your control, but shielded from outside access. And I'd like you to undergo a cognitive evaluation just in case someone challenges your decisions later. I've seen enough storms to know preparation matters." I told him. He smiled faintly. "You always did think like a builder." The paperwork took weeks. Every line read twice. Every number confirmed. I sold the house quietly to a family who wanted to restore it rather than demolish it. The funds went into 3 separate trusts, each one carefully managed. When everything was complete, Henry placed the final documents in front of me. "You've just built something stronger than concrete, Pei," he said. At home, I framed the original blueprints above my desk. The edges were yellowed, but the lines were clean, deliberate, every measurement still true. I looked at them the way soldiers might look at medals, not for pride, but for remembrance. Outside, the afternoon light slanted across the windows, touching the drawings like a benediction. For the first time in months, I felt steady again, as if every nail and calculation had led to this quiet defense. The house was gone, but its strength remained transferred into paper, law, and will. Clara chose the same restaurant by the harbor for my next birthday. She said it was tradition now, though I could hear the calculation behind her cheerfulness. The table was already set when we arrived: flowers, cake, and a small box wrapped in gold paper. Daniel looked uneasy, his fingers tracing the edge of his napkin. Clara filled the silence before it could grow. "You've been on our minds so much. Evelyn, we've been thinking it's time to simplify things for you. Fewer responsibilities, less worry." "I'm not worried," I said. "Everything's taken care of." "That's exactly what we wanted to talk about." Her smile didn't falter, but her voice thinned. "We went by the house yesterday. The locks seemed old. Daniel thought maybe it was time to change them. For safety." "Did he?" I asked. Daniel cleared his throat. "Yeah, I can handle it later today. Just a small fix." The waiter came with the cake chocolate with white frosting, candles already burning. Clara clapped her hands together, too loudly. "Make a wish, Evelyn." I watched the flames, steady and even. I didn't close my eyes. "I think I already have what I wished for." She laughed awkwardly. "You've always been so mysterious." Daniel pushed his chair back. "I'll be right back. Just a call I need to make." The rain had started outside, soft against the glass. Clara leaned forward, talking quickly about grandchildren, about how they'd love to have me closer. Her words stumbled, filling the air like a nervous metronome. 15 minutes passed, then 20. When the door opened again, Daniel stepped in, pale and sweating. His phone was still in his hand. "Something went wrong," he said quietly. "The locks, the house, it's gone." Clara froze. "What do you mean? Gone? She sold it," he whispered. "It's not hers anymore. It's under another name." The silence that followed stretched so wide it seemed to absorb the music from the speakers. Clara turned to me, eyes sharp, voice trembling. "You sold the house." Without telling us, I lifted my coffee cup, calm as stone. 3 weeks ago, I said, everything was finalized. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Daniel sank into his seat, staring at the tablecloth as if it could explain the shift that had just taken place. I smiled, not in victory, but in recognition. For the first time in years, the foundation beneath me felt solid again. 3 days after the lunch, an envelope arrived by courier, thick, official, and heavy with intent. My name was printed cleanly on the front, but the handwriting beneath it, the signature of acknowledgement, was Daniel's. I opened it at the kitchen table. Inside were court papers, petition for temporary guardianship. The words were clinical, but the message was sharp enough to cut through me. They were claiming I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. I called Henry Lang before I finished reading. "They've filed it," I said. He didn't sound surprised. "I thought they might." "I already pulled the preliminary notice from the court system. We'll respond within the week. They're saying I'm mentally unfit." He paused. That's a cruel choice of words. Evelyn, but not an unusual one. I heard myself laugh, low and tired, unusual or not. "It still has my son's name on it." Henry's tone softened. "We have everything we need. Sale records, notarized signatures, your evaluation all verified. Let them talk." When I hung up, I spread the documents across the table, the edges aligned perfectly. Neat rows of proof. My hands didn't shake. Each paper was a layer of protection, precise as the beams I'd once measured on site. That night, Daniel called. His voice was careful, rehearsed. "Mom, Clara said you might misunderstand the petition. It's for your protection, that's all." "My protection," I repeated. "You think the woman who built her own house can't balance a checkbook?" He sighed. "You've been stubborn. We just want what's best for you." "What's best," I said quietly, "is that I still know who I am." He didn't answer. When the line went silent, I gathered the papers again, stacked them evenly, and placed them beside the framed blueprints. The same tools, different battlefield. Chapter 8. The hearing. The courtroom smelled faintly of old paper and rain. Clara sat beside Daniel, her posture sharp, her face composed. Across from them, Henry placed a single folder on the table. Their lawyer spoke first. "Mrs. Harrow has acted impulsively, selling her primary residence without consulting her family. We have concerns about her cognitive stability and financial judgment." Henry didn't interrupt. He waited, then rose slowly. "My client," he said, "has acted with full legal clarity. Here are notarized sale documents, verified financial transfers, and a psychological evaluation confirming complete mental competence." He handed the judge the folder, then looked at me. "Mrs. Harrow, would you like to speak?" I stood, feeling the stiffness in my knees but none in my voice. "I built that house. I sold it because my son and his wife were preparing to take control of it. Every choice I made was deliberate, not confused." The judge studied me for a long moment. Clara whispered something to Daniel, but he didn't look at her. Henry added quietly, "The truth, Your Honor, often doesn't need volume to be heard." The room settled into silence so complete I could hear the rain tapping against the glass. Then the judge nodded once, his pen moving steadily across the page. The judge's voice was even, his words precise. "There is no evidence of incapacity or mismanagement. The petition for guardianship is denied." For a moment, no one moved. Clara's smile froze, the confidence draining from her face. Daniel's shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the table. Henry gathered the documents, sliding them neatly into his briefcase. "It's over," he murmured, Clara spoke first, her voice brittle. "We were only trying to protect you." I turned toward her. "No," I said. "You were trying to own me." She opened her mouth, but Daniel's hand found her wrist. "Clara," he whispered. "Stop." I rose carefully, feeling the ache in my knees. The bailiff held the door open, and the echo of my shoes followed me into the hallway. Henry walked beside me, his tone gentle. "You handled that with grace." "It wasn't about grace," I said. "It was about remembering what I built." Outside, the rain had stopped. The courthouse steps shone under a thin film of water, smooth as poured concrete. I stood there a moment, breathing in the wet air. Behind me, their voices blurred into the distance, and I felt the quiet settle solid, earned, and steady beneath my feet. Months passed before the quiet began to feel like home. My new cottage sat close to the harbor, small enough that I could hear the boats knock gently against the dock at night. I spent my mornings at the youth center, teaching carpentry to anyone willing to learn how to measure twice and cut once. The smell of sawdust still felt like belonging. One afternoon, a letter arrived. The handwriting was tight, uncertain. It was from Clara. "I'm sorry." It read, "Fear made me cruel. I thought taking control would keep us safe. I was wrong. I hope someday you'll forgive me." There was no signature at the bottom, just a smudge where the ink had blurred. I placed the letter beside the old photograph of the house on Bayline Road. Daniel had taken it when he was 5. His hand covering half the frame. The sun dipped low, turning the water gold. I stood by the porch and switched on the light, facing the dock. "You forgot who built it," I whispered. Then I left the light burning.